Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand the big question. In the about to be concluded US and Iran conflict, we'll try to understand who actually won this war, whether it was US or Iran. And the reason why we have picked up this topic for our today's discussion is nearly 4 months after Washington and Israel launched their campaign against Israel by bombing several locations and killing the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The peace agreement between these two warring parties is about to be signed in Switzerland on June the 19th. And therefore, the biggest question that is in minds of all the viewers, we are going to understand and assess that question. The question is, who has actually won this war? Whether it was US or is it Iran? And the notes which I will be using for our today's session, you can also download them by going to a particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel as well. So let us start our today's discussion by understanding what are the expected parts of the agreement which is about to be signed between these two warring parties. You need to understand the specific provisions of these agreements are yet to be made public, but they will be about to be on the expected lines that we are going to discuss today. Now, from Iran sides, they have agreed to first of all declare that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened for all commercial vessels. Second, Iran has agreed that on all military fronts, including that of Lebanon, the conflict is going to be terminated. And it is expected that Iran is going to commit to not acquire nuclear weapons in the future by agreeing to maintain a status quo on its nuclear program. What is the status quo of its nuclear program? That Iran will agree to not enrich nuclear fuel further. And this, please understand, is pending a final agreement which is expected to be signed within 60 days of this June 19 agreement. So this is what Iran has agreed to do as a part of ending this particular conflict. Now, let us understand what has US agreed to. US has agreed to end the naval blockade, which will be lifted within 30 days of the signing of this MOU. Similarly, US has said that $24 billion worth of frozen Iranian assets, which US had frozen through crippling economic sanctions, they will be released and no new sanctions will be imposed on Iran within the 30 days of this MOU. Similarly, US has said that Iran will in this 30 days will be able to temporarily sell its oil to other major oil procurers in the world, and a reconstruction and development plan is expected to be signed, which will be negotiated within 60 days of signing of this MOU. So these are the sum total of concessions both of these parties have made in order to bring this conflict to an end. Now, in order to assess this conflict, we'll have to understand what were the objectives of the conflict for both sides, what have these sides gained and what have these sides lost. And then we'll try to analyze who has actually won and who has actually lost this war. So first, let us try to understand what were the declared and undeclared objectives of US and Iran before the conflict began. So US started this conflict with an explicit objective to end Iran's nuclear program. US wanted that Iran going forward should not possess any nuclear weapons, and it should also give up all the highly enriched nuclear fuel that Iran possessed. Similarly, US also wanted to dismantle Iran's missile and drone program, which perceived to be a threat to all major US allies in the region, including the Middle Eastern Arab states as well as Israel. Similarly, US also wanted to end Iran's axis of resistance, which is a sum total of non-state actors that Iran funded and supported in order to check the US and its allies' dominance in the region. These included the 3H, that is Hamas, Houthis as well as Hezbollahs. And the implicit or the unsaid objective of US government was to introduce a regime change. As you can understand, Iran since few decades has been under a theological autocratic regime of the Ayatollah, that is the supreme leader, called as a theocratic regime. So US wanted to bring this regime to an end and introduce a full-fledged democracy in Iran. So this was US's objective before the war began. Now let us try to understand what what was Iran's objective? Iran's objective naturally was to retain its nuclear program so as that it would give advantage when it comes to Iran countering US allies in the region. And you need to understand, Israel, although it has not declared publicly, but it still possesses nuclear weapons. Similarly, in this objective or in this war, Iran also wanted to avoid any kind of military or economic collapse, because if military or economic collapse would come, its regime automatically would be changed. And therefore, it also wanted to protect its axis of resistance, which gave Iran a leverage over countering American allies in the region. And ultimate aim of the Iran's government was to protect the regime, that is the institution of supreme leader headed by the Ayatollah, right? So this is what both the parties wanted before the war actually began. Now, since the war began, naturally both of these parties gained something. So what is this something? Let us understand this. First, US was able to dismantle about 80% of Iran's military base, and therefore it has been degraded. Second, that last year through Operation Midnight Hammer, US and Israel put together was able to bomb several of Iran's nuclear facilities, including Fordo, Natanz, as well as Isfahan. So these facilities now have been severely damaged, which gives US a definite advantage in the region. Similarly, as far as Iran's access to the nuclear or highly enriched nuclear stockpiles are concerned, they are now behind the rubble that has been left after the bombing, and therefore Iran is not able to access, although it still has those highly enriched nuclear fuel, but it is not able to access them. So these are the definitive advantages that US has gained since the start of this conflict. Now, what about Iran? Iran, first of all, has been able to make sure that its regime headed by the Ayatollah or the supreme leader remains intact, and this is after the months of bombardment that has been done by the US allies, including the Israel. Similarly, a new advantage Iran has been able to get since the start of this war. Now, before the war, Iran always threatened to other countries that if and when US would bomb Iran, it would first take measure by disrupting the traffic that goes around the Strait of Hormuz. And this was not a proven capability. But since the war, as Iran has been able to impose what is called as an blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, this gives Iran a definite advantage as far as other countries are concerned. Similarly, all those assets that was not in possession of Iran just because of the crippling economic sanctions by the Western countries led by US, now all of these frozen assets are up for debate. Iran's frozen asset, including money which Iran would get in case of reconstruction and redevelopment, all of them are now up for discussion. So these are the significant gains that Iran has made since the start of this war. Now, what about the things that both of these countries have lost? Let us discuss that also. Now, US's implicit objective before the war was that they wanted to change this regime. Have they able to change the regime? The answer is no. So this is obviously a strategic failure for US. What about Iran's nuclear question? What about Iran's being able to possess nuclear weapon? Has this been cleared? The answer is no. So the nuclear question of whether Iran going forward would continue to possess nuclear weapons or not, or have that capability to enrich nuclear fuel or not, that question still remain unresolved. What about blockade? In order to counter Iran's aggression, US military had declared that they would blockade all the Iranian ports. So now, before signing this agreement, US has agreed that it will now lift those blockades. So this is a concession US has made. So you can argue that this is a loss of face of America. Now, what about Iran's missiles and drone program? As you can understand, after the American allies were bombing Iran actually retaliated by sending missiles and drones to all the American allies in the region, including the Arab states who were not a direct party to the war. So this missile and drone program of Iran, which gave it a leverage during the war, is not up for discussion, and this will be left intact. What about the frozen assets? US, although has been able to unfreeze that asset, so you can understand the leverage US has had in order to create economic pressures on Iran now has been in a way lost. Now let us discuss what has Iran lost in this conflict. The most and obvious loss of Iran has been that its senior leadership, including the previous supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, all of them have been killed in this conflict. And in this 60-day window, after the signing of the MOU, Iran will not be able to enrich any uranium. So this is also a concession Iran has made. Similarly, as Iran was able to control the strait after the end of the war, it wanted to have some kind of a right to tax even the commercial shipping that flows through Strait of Hormuz. Now, for signing this agreement, Iran has given up this right. So you can say Iran has lost this. Similarly, the axis of resistance, which allowed Iran, in order to seek power with all the American allies in the region, that is being able to fund and support operationally Houthis, Hezbollah, as well as Hamas, have been severely degraded. So all of this is what Iran has lost in this conflict. Now, let us try to analyze from both of the perspective what they have won and what they have lost. Let us first discuss American perspective. Now, before going into this conflict, America has sure shot two advantage. The first advantage they had, that since decades they had imposed crippling economic sanctions on Iran, and this was able to isolate Iran both diplomatically, economically, as well as militarily. Because of these sanctions, Iran was not able to procure modern weapons. It was not able to sell its most cherished resource, that is crude oil, and this in a way not just economically but also strategically isolated and weakened Iran significantly. Similarly, last year's Operation Midnight Hammer was able to physically damage the Iran's capability to enrich nuclear fuels through centrifuges. And not just that, whatever nuclear fuel Iran had enriched, now it is not able to possess them because all of these fuel are now under the rubble. That is the remains of what were Natanz, Isfahan and Fordo. So these were the two definite advantage US has had even before the war. Now US thought, on top of this advantage, let us use now military force in order to force Iran to do something. So what was this something US was trying to achieve? US was trying to first of all impose a permanent and verifiable denuclearization on Iran. It wanted Iran to give up the ability or to give up the right to enrich nuclear fuel, and ultimately it would result into Iran giving up its nuclear ambition. So this was the explicit goal of US, and the implicit goal of US was to bring a regime change, which it wanted to end the theocratic regime which was headed by supreme leader. Now, using this advantage, US thought, why not use its military power in order to cripple Iran? And this was kind of a threat that US has given to Iran since long time, right? But after it has used this leverage, now you can understand US has not been able to meet its strategic objectives, and as a result the nuclear question, it has not been stopped, rather it has been deferred to another set of negotiations that will happen after the signing of this MOU on June 19th. Similarly, US has now is letting to unfreeze all of those assets which it was able to prevent Iran from being isolated. So all of these, you can understand, is something of a giveaway from US's part, and therefore they have in a way lost in this conflict. Now, what about Iran's perspective? Now, Iran, when it entered into a war, it was economically as well as militarily very weak and vulnerable. Now, after this conflict, it has emerged as the gatekeeper of Strait of Hormuz. As I told you, Iran had multiple times threatened the world that whenever there would be a conflict in the region, its first line of action would be to disrupt the commercial traffic in Strait of Hormuz. And you can understand, economically, Strait of Hormuz is very crucial for global shipping. It is responsible for transport of most of the crude oil from resource-rich Arab states to major crude oil markets like China, like India, right? And it was able to demonstrate, or it had the capability, but it was unproven. But now after the war, this capability has been proven because of the disruption that Iran had created. And the ultimate aim of Islamic regime of Iran was to able to survive this war. And has Iran been able to survive this war? The answer is yes. Although severely depleted, but in survival, it has been able to survive. Now, On this basis of analysis, let us understand what has been Iran able to gain. Iran has been able to keep its missile and drones program away from any kind of restriction because these are not subject of discussions as far as MOU is concerned. Although the axis of resistance that the Iran support in terms of economic and operational support to Hamas, Houthi and Hezbollah has been frozen, but Iran remains the right to make them active again in case US and Israel violate the terms of the agreement. So Iran still in a way theory retains the capability to again open up another front by supporting of axis of resistance. So now let us understand who has won and who has lost the war. In terms of fulfillment of military objectives, you need to understand US has definitely won this war and Iran has lost it because 80% of Iran's industrial defense capabilities, its military has been degraded, and its 3 nuclear sites which were able to enrich uranium up to 60%, very close to the weapons grade uranium, this capability of Iran has been degraded. But what about meeting strategic objectives? As I told you, the strategic objectives of US were 2: in order to prevent Iran from going nuclear and to ensure regime change in Iran. Has this strategic objective of US been completed? The answer is no. So in terms of fulfilling of strategic objectives are concerned, here US has lost this war and Iran has won this war. So the big question is, who has lost this conflict? The answer here is definitely Israel. Because from Israel's perspective, the moot question of Israel before this war began was to end the capability of Iran in order to enrich uranium and be able to have nuclear weapons. So it is failed to eliminate Iran's nuclear program, and therefore from perspective of Israel, this is a failure. Now since the Israel and Hamas conflict has begun, slowly by slowly, Israel is getting diplomatically isolated in the world, and the only country which has been able to support it diplomatically was US. But as the negotiations between US and Iran was ongoing on this conflict, what Israel did, it bombed the Lebanon's capital of Beirut. Now because of this bombing of Israel of Beirut, it has rewarded a rebuke from Trump himself, and therefore it means that before the start of the war, Israel was already diplomatically isolated, and now at the end of the war, it is now more diplomatically isolated as compared to before. And therefore, the Israel's Prime Minister has categorically given a rejection to the MOU which has been signed because it has included the deal of cessation of conflict even in Lebanon itself. So this is the complete analysis of the situation. To summarize, as far as military objectives is concerned, the US has won this war because it has been able to severely, up to 80%, degrade the capabilities of Iran's defense. But as far as meeting the strategic objectives is concerned, US has not been able to fulfill its strategic objectives of making Iran go denuclear and ensuring a regime change in Iran. So on that basis, US has definitely lost this war. Now, before we end up our today's discussion, there is a question which appeared in this year's prelims examination based on the exact discussion that we had today. But before that, please ensure taking admissions to StudyIQ P2I resolution courses. In our P2I resolution courses, all of them are offered in a smart model. That is, you're provided a structured classes and mentorship, which helps you assess, which helps you revise, and which helps you practice your learning by giving test series from time to time. Now, to take admissions to these courses, just go to our website, and before making the payment, if you use this code ATS Live, you're going to get maximum discounts. Please understand the 50% off on all the courses. This is just a limited time offer. And by the time you decide, this offer is about to end. So make sure to take admissions as soon as possible and do not miss out on this very important deal. Right? Now, before we end up, this is the question I'd want you to solve. Ship from which of the following countries would have to cross the Strait of Hormuz in order to reach the Indian Ocean? This question came this year in prelims examination, very on the expected lines. Please try to attempt this question and do let me know the correct answers in the comment section. So what do you feel? Has US categorically lost this war and has Iran won this? Because as far as things are situated right now, Iran in a way is in better position strategically as it was before the war. So do let me know what do you feel in the comment section, and if you want to download the notes, this is where you'd find them on the Telegram channel called as ATS Live. So this is all from my side for today. Please have a very good day. We'll see each other again quite soon.